Okay, great. So everybody should probably get a little pop-up that allows consent to record. Welcome, everybody, and thank you who was able to join this morning as we kick off the first annual Design and Discourse Capstone Studio Presentation Series. The presenters that we have today are Kedzie, Rutan, and Josilyn, Welch, who have both been examining the impact of senses and stimuli in connecting and disconnecting people from their environments. Today, you'll hear unique perspectives from both about environments pertaining to airports and art exhibitions. So I will first turn the floor over to Kedzie directly, followed by Josilyn, and then after both presentations, any remaining time we will have will be for Q&A, and then also some concluding words from Dustin Alchol, who is RITI faculty and also guiding the spring semester portion of the Capstone Studio. So thank you again, and with that, I will allow Kedzie to kick it off.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining. I do see some familiar names. Teskey, thanks for hopping on this morning. With that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Everyone can see this okay? I'm going to blow it up in a minute, but okay, thanks. All right, so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kedzie Rutan, and this is my senior thesis, Please Wait, which is redefining the waiting experience through design. Today, I'm hoping to just kind of give everyone a rundown of my process of where my ideas started, my initial research, some things that came out of that, and then go over a precedent study. And then lastly, just talk a little bit about the programming that I've begun doing from my research and how I'm integrating that into my second semester this year. So this project first started out, as Kim mentioned, I will be analyzing how users wait within a commercial airport environment. But I wanted to start out by just introducing what is waiting. I think that this graphic really represents things well. Even though there is a technical definition for waiting, it can be different for every single individual, depending on their environment, how comfortable they feel, if they have to get any tasks done, and things like that. So the act of waiting is remaining inactive in one place while expecting something to happen. Next, I'm going to jump into my abstract. Waiting is an unavoidable part of the commercial flying experience, whether that's navigating through security, checking your bags, or even just waiting to board your flight. It's something that happens at multiple different checkpoints throughout your journey. I identified a problem, I'm going to call it, that airport designs and programs risk being too vast to understand differences in user sensitivity, as well as they can be very anxiety provoking. If you're new, if you're comfortable, things can always pop up. So I wanted to research how the capabilities of multisensory design can integrate into waiting areas to redefine waiting experiences for individuals during their journey. Next, moving on to my premise, I've stated that many international airports lack these in-between waiting spaces that are sensitive towards user diversity. And by integrating a design approach that enables the 5 senses, the structure of these spaces can result in the promotion of comfort and aid in reducing common travel anxieties. So this graphic here is a brief overview of the main research topics that I've looked into, as well as my project outcomes. So the 3 main things that I researched were sensory design, phenomenology, which I'll explain a little bit further here because I was unfamiliar with it. So I'm assuming that some of you may be as well. Phenomenology is really what sensory design is rooted within, and it is the study of an exploration of physical experiences of buildings, building materials, and then their sensory properties that they give off. Lastly, I did some research on universal design, and while I was going through all this research, I noticed kind of an overlap between all of them, being that sensory design is truly inclusive and embraces the human condition. And from here, I then identified 4 project outcomes that I'll be really focused in on this semester through my programming and then my integrated design solution. So These four are: one, design a transitional space that supports multi-purpose traffic for a variety of user needs. Number two, implement an informed design solution that considers accessibility, public safety, and privacy. These are three things that I researched initially first semester that are really important. They vary depending on what type of user you are. I'll get into that a little bit later, but these are just three things that really stuck out to me in first semester that are important, especially considering how people are experiencing large commercial environments. My third outcome is integrate tangible and intangible design considerations that influence connection and spatial experience. This is where I'm really hoping to tie in my phenomenology research, as well as really bring in that sensory design research as well. And then lastly, advocate a sense of individual identity within an ecosystem of a large commercial environment. So next, I'm really going to cover today my sensory research. So we all should be familiar with these. We learned about them in kindergarten. But this graphic here, I'm really trying to indicate that while all of our senses do have their own function independently, they really combine and codepend on each other to create what we call our sense of perception. So next, I'm going to dive into each one of the senses a little bit more. So sight, we're all familiar. It's a very contextual sense. It allows us to get a sense of direction and create our context of the physical space that we are within. It's also very physical and allows people to interpret things like color and shape, dimension, texture, etc. Next, smell. A lot of the research that I did surrounding smell is that it has a very close tie to memory. So I've found many studies that say that smell is associated with a time and place stimulant that is even more powerful sometimes than like actually a visual cue. So I thought that was something that was very interesting. It's something that I didn't necessarily think of, the sense of smell being so impactful in how we interpret the spaces around us. But it also is very objective and will change from person to person. So that's something that I will be considering. Then we have taste, which I said is very primal. It is kind of always there, whether we realize it or not. It's part of our involuntary breathing and digestion. It can also be very tactile. It's kind of like our sense of touch for when we're eating food, so we can feel, textures, things like that, physical qualities. And then it also is very contextual as well. It can kind of change depending on the environment that we're in. Next, I've got touch, which I've called out as layered. It allows us to feel things like temperature, texture, pressure, and even resistance, but it is also very active. So I'd say this is because we're using our hands, feet, things like that to interact with our environment. It's kind of what grounds us to feel what's going around us. Last, we have hearing, which is also very personal, similar to taste. It can change for each person and it'll change over a lifetime. It's also spatial. It allows us to recognize and really build a picture of the places and events and things going on around us. And then it's also our main form of communication through discourse, socialization, things like that. That's really how we hear, interpret, and react to our environment. And it is also experiential, which here I've listed out. I thought this was really good quote that I'd found. So whether heard with the ears or felt with the body, sound develops human beings and creates awareness. I think that one really pinpoints that sense well. So next, this is where I started kind of refining my idea, looking at the different users within the space, and then I'll further explain how I eventually got to my main target area. So within an airport environment, I identified 5 main user groups. 1, the business traveler, 2, families, 3, the leisure seeker, 4, occasional travelers, and then lastly, adventure seekers. This graph here shows each one of them, gives them a little bit of identity, and then I broke it down into the main things that they are really looking for within their waiting experience. So I'll touch on a couple, but the business traveler, for example, might be somebody that's on the go, really looks for like the functionality, the efficiency of the spaces that they're in, and maybe they're even needing a touchdown to technology to do that work. So just looking at all these different main things that people are looking for within their waiting environments in this commercial atmosphere. I then did some surveying for each one of these user groups, and it allowed me to create these graphs that you can see here. I'm just going to explain it a little bit so you can get a little bit more context. So this is a timeline of checkpoints that you would experience during your travel journey, starting from leaving your house to go to the airport, checking into the airport, checking your bags, going through security, finding your gate, waiting at your gate, actually boarding the plane, to then actually flying and then landing and commuting from the airport. So same line here of checkpoints, but then I surveyed and evaluated these users based on the emotions that they felt at each one of these checkpoints. So I asked them about their excitement, delightment, disappointment, sadness, confusion, and boredom. So that's how these were created. And then this allowed me to then pick my main target area, which is rest time and waiting. I identified that among all of these travelers, and it was like this among other checkpoints as well, but they identified feeling multiple emotions simultaneously. So, and some of them even conflicted each other. So you can see on some of these graphs that they may have been excited, but they could have been sad at the same time. So it really just depended on, you know, the user's purpose of travel, what was going on in their life, things like that. But it allowed me to gauge that this rest time area was really a main target that I wanted to focus on moving forward in the active and passive waiting spaces and how they interact with them during their travel journey. So then I conducted a precedent study. I decided to focus on one specific airport, but then look at 3 different areas within it. So this is the Pittsburgh International Airport. I went through and I assessed a standard waiting area, which most of you would be familiar with, just like a standard boarding, a gate area, you know, down the long hallway, extends off of the side. You just kind of sit in those chairs and wait to board your flight. Then I also looked at an airport lounge, which was a little bit more private, had like area to dine, had some breakout areas where you could kind of touch down, plug into technology, but also still had things like flight information. So you were still staying up to speed as you would if you were, you know, sitting in that airport gate where they're announcing, okay, in 10 minutes, this flight's taking off. So I assessed the lounge, and then I also assessed a sensory room within this airport that was very specific to people that had neurodiversities and things like that, to just make them feel a little bit more relaxed before it kind of acted as a touchdown space for people where after you get through security, after going through all those checkpoints, if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, you could then take a break. They have private rooms, they have play areas for kids. And I thought that looking at all of these across one specific environment would allow me to see how sensory design changes throughout. So here I just did a little assessment and looked at similarities and differences among them. And I did notice that throughout this precedent study, it did get more specialized. Obviously, this was designed specifically for the senses, this room here, the sensory room, but even between the normal gate and the airport lounge, there was major differences. And even in terms of privacy and territoriality and things like that, I saw a lot of differences. So it helped me kind of get in touch with the environment that I would be working in. So then this is more recent information, but I was able to finally determine a site. I will be looking at the McNamara terminal, which is located in the Detroit Metro Airport. Some of you may have flown out of this airport. I have before, but not super recently. It is 4 levels, including like the lower level, but I will be focusing mainly on the second level where the boarding gates are located. This graph here is a plan view where I've blocked out different spatial typologies. So here this guide points out airport lounges, dining areas, restrooms, things like that. And then I've also pointed out the main existing conditions that I felt were important, just to give my project a little bit more context. We've got this main water feature that's centrally located. It's a large fountain. I'm planning on keeping that. And then as well as the LED light tunnel. This is something that I think is really, really cool. And I just kind of I stumbled across it. I've never been in it myself, but I think with the sensory research that I've done around like lighting and just creating an environment that can be a little bit more peaceful and calming for people, that this is something that I'll integrate within my design or have it located closer to my design, just to add to the design itself. And then I also wanted to point out that there is direct connection to a hotel facility out of this concourse. So moving forward, I've identified 3 different spatial typologies that I'm going to work on reformatting to really redefine and integrate my research to have spaces just be set up differently. So first, I'm going to do an airport gate, which is my most public area, and it's going to include a main waiting area, a secondary waiting area, a help kiosk, as well as a boarding zone. Then I will look at a airport lounge, which is, I'm identifying it as a semi-private area that's going to have a welcome/check-in area, a interior and exterior lounge, a bar area, and then a retail area, as well as restroom and locker room, and a spa and gym. And then lastly, I'm going to look at a private amenity, which is my most private typology. That's going to include a welcome and check-in, a relaxation pod, a private area, say you want to touch down and do some work if you're traveling on the go, and then also a shower room and a retail area. So this is my conclusion here. I just went over these typologies, but I wanted to just give a little bit more context on where these thoughts are headed by showing you some initial bubble diagrams that I have started working on, looking at the primary and secondary adjacencies within each one of these spaces. This also lays out the main square footage requirements that I'm looking to work within, as well as a definition of the space. But this is kind of where I'm at right now. I'm really excited to keep moving it forward. I'm hoping that you guys are also excited. I think that, you know, the airport experience right now and how we wait can be improved. And I'm hoping that my sensory design research and my universal design research will really help engage people to have a deeper connection with the spaces that they interact with during their journey. So that concludes my presentation. So I'm going to switch over to Josilyn.
Hello, everyone. Can you all see my screen? Wait, sorry, I can't see you guys. Okay, can you see my screen now? Great. First off, thank you so much, Kedzie, for sharing that with us. I feel like that's a great segue into my conversation that I'm here to talk to you guys about. And also, thank you everyone for joining. Also see some familiar faces, so excited about that. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Josilyn Welch, and my thesis project is called Connections Through Contrast, and it's about the built environment embracing fine art exhibition. So to start off, I want to give you guys like a really high level idea of what's going on in my project objectives. For this project, I wanted to first recontextualize the critical role of the museum as a space, as an environment that creates connections between the built environment, the art that it accommodates, and its occupants. The second project objective is to mitigate the common mental, physical, and social barriers that exist within the current museum model. The third is to promote identified mental, physical, and social enablers within the redefined museum context. And 4 is to create contrasting exhibit spaces designed to reflect the pieces they contain to achieve empathetic immersion within visitors. So, where do I go next? Here. That's a lot to go over. So I'm going to be covering today a really high level conversation on empathetic immersion within the museum environment. So as far as the agenda, I will be going over what empathetic immersion really is, some museum case studies that I looked at for this project, a survey that I conducted that goes over visual perceptions of art and its interiors, barriers and enablers of empathetic immersion, and then empathetic immersion spatial distributions within the museum model. But first, I'd like to show you guys a quote that's inspired my project thus far. Being art has the power to render sorrow beautiful, make loneliness a shared experience, and transform despair into hope. The ability to capture our pain and suffer us from it and deliver us from it at the same time, which is by Brené Brown. So first off, what is empathetic immersion? Empathetic immersion allows you as an individual to gain a deeper understanding of those around you and then consequently yourself. This can be done by engaging in like a sensory understanding of a particular condition that may not have occurred otherwise. And that's defined by completely being enveloped within your surroundings. This first developed and was popularized by virtual reality environments in employee training and sensitivity training. So it's kind of a new concept in that manner, but it's something that I did want to cover in this project. And you'll see in the graphic that it kind of pulls out like a really basic model of empathetic immersion within a museum space, being 3 factors of the environment, the art itself, and then the viewer. And when these 3 things overlap, that's when you can achieve empathetic immersion. This kind of calls out a graphic that shows people interacting within a museum space, interacting with each other and interacting with the art. The 3 layers of empathetic immersion, again, being the viewer, the environment, and the art within it. So connecting with the art on a deeper level and having an understanding of the emotions within the art can allow for the empathetic immersion to be achieved. And also can be a factor in how much people enjoy art and the level at which they interact with the art itself. This can also be a benefit because it can foster a sense of belonging within the community, within this shared experience at a museum. Next, I'll be going over some case studies. You can see the layers again of the empathetic immersion that have been layered over these pictures. In the blue, you'll see art, in green, you'll see the environment, and in purple, you'll see the viewer. This was a study that I conducted, pulling images of paintings of the 12 sunflowers that were done by Vincent van Gogh. I'm sure you've seen them, they're very popular. But just analyzing how the museums have chosen to display these pieces is something that I wanted to take a deeper look at, and how the environment itself can help inform the viewer on how to interact with the art and what they should be doing. For example, in figure 14 at the Sampo Museum of Art, you'll see at the top left, they've chosen to put their 12 sunflowers behind a piece of glass, which can maybe prohibit that immersive experience, versus you'll see on the right top picture at the Philadelphia Art Museum, the painting has its own wall and there's actually no physical barrier between the art and the viewer, so that can create a more immersive experience. And then something kind of in the middle, you'll see on the bottom is the Amsterdam Art Museum, where it has like a small barrier just at the bottom, so it keeps people from standing too close, but it still has that barrier that's in front of them. Again, you'll see some more pictures here where there's a new museum in Munich and the National Gallery in London. So all of these pictures just kind of show how the environment plays a key role in the 2 other layers, which can either promote the interaction or hinder it. So next I'll be going over the visual evaluation survey that I sent out to people, and I had over 200 respondents, which was pretty great. 199 of these respondents are actually counted from this data that I collected, but I mean, as of today, there are over 200, which is just awesome. And thank you for everyone who's participated in that. This visual evaluation survey was actually a semantic differential scale. And that's just kind of a technical term of saying what words do you associate with this image. And actually, this is what the survey looked like if you pulled it up on your phone or your laptop. A picture would be displayed, and then below it, it asked the question, what emotions do you associate with this image? Mostly negative on the very left and mostly positive on the very right. And then through that, I was able to evaluate people's positive and negative visual qualities in accordance to fine art as well as interiors and also some exterior spaces. So we had a very high positive correlation between the sunflowers by Vincent van Gogh, also more Van Gogh, which was Terrace at Night, which is, you know, not surprising, as well as interiors like churches and even like proton therapy centers. So there's main visual qualities that I will be pulling out in this slide after this that were shown to be mostly, if I can get there. Hello. There you go. Mostly positive or mostly negative. These ones are negative visual qualities that were actually pulled from the survey. So you can see how on these line graphs at the top, you'll see there's like mostly negative correlation versus if I flip back to, oops, back to the other side, there's mostly positive correlation. So mostly negative visual experiences, I define contain elements as a disconnect from nature, some unsaturated and cool colors. If there's subjects in the image, they're going to be in distress or look uncomfortable, and vast and open spaces and maybe like undefinable spaces where you don't know quite where you are. Some visually positive experiences contain elements like connection to nature, rich colors and sunlight, balanced compositions, and familiarity and nostalgic symbols. So just things like pieces of art that people are, you know, already familiar with, like Van Goghs that are very popular, seem to have a high positive correlation, even if they do contain some things like cool colors or, you know, maybe subjects in distress or whatever. So this visual evaluation survey kind of helped inform these two separate spaces that I'll be defining in my project, and how hope and sorrow can both inform, you know, the context of what it is to be human, and implement those into the two hope and sorrow galleries that I plan on putting in my thesis project. From there, I actually identified physical, mental, and social barriers and enablers within museum spaces that can either contribute or hinder empathetic immersion. So I've made these pretty simple graphics to just kind of pull out information that I've gotten from my visual evaluation survey, as well as my case studies and hours and hours of research, otherwise that have just been synthesized into these few graphics that I'll be showing you guys. So the first one being physical barriers to empathetic immersion. I showed you guys the image of the Sample Museum of Art with physical barriers separating the viewer and the artwork with that glass piece in front of the 15 sunflowers, and then overcrowded display walls. So people might become confused and not being able to focus on one thing at a time. And then distracting finishes and fixtures. So even having like security cameras and very light fixtures like in your face that may be distracting to the art itself by pulling you out of the immersive experience. Some physical enablers are organization of exhibits that are consistent in height. So just keeping that mounting height consistent and readable for the viewers. Access to natural light, that's always going to be something that's good, but also a problem for preservation for actual art pieces. So there's going to have to like some creative solutions to help mitigate that. But regardless, hanging works displayed 4 feet from another to avoid the overcrowding that I mentioned in the physical barriers. Making sure that the museum label has the appropriate text size and optimal length for readability so that, you know, users don't feel overwhelmed. And comfortable options for seating to encourage extended exposure to artworks within the museum aisle. And then something that I've suggested that I haven't seen much of, but something that you'll be seeing in my final product is spaces to reflect and digest within gallery with a higher level of privacy. So you can have those maybe more intimate conversations with another, or even thoughts to yourself. Then we can move on to mental barriers and enablers of empathetic immersion within the museum environment, being varying heights and general disorganization of museum displays. That also goes along with overcrowding, but can promote confusion within the viewers. Lengthy descriptions and use of jargon in the museum label. Try to stay away from that, just because, I mean, you're not sure exactly what people's ideas are, first understandings are when they step into the museum. So being able to make that accessible for all people, no matter their education level or familiarity with a piece of art, is really important. Creating a queue to the entrance of the space. This mentally prepares the visitor for the experience that they're about to have. Windows connecting to the exterior space so they have a sense of place where they are in the building. The logical organization of displayed objects, so making a common theme so that it's easier to digest for the viewers. And then again, the digestible and accessible information on the museum label. Lastly, the social barriers of and enablers of empathetic immersion in the museum space could be the barriers as a high price of admission. So not everyone has, access to a bunch of money to go spend on an afternoon at the museum. So making sure it's accessible to all, no matter how much it costs. And then overcrowded and high capacity gallery spaces. Some people aren't super comfortable with being surrounded by a ton of people and crowds, which is, personally also me. I'm not a huge fan of that, especially when I'm trying to absorb something in a museum setting. So keeping that to a minimum would be optimal. And then some enablers is a user's choice for displayed art interaction. So being able to choose which pieces of art that you think are important or you think that are interesting, and being able to spend a little extra time with those, or maybe skipping over other pieces and not being forced to look at them, is a good idea, as well as opportunity for chance and planned encounters with other people. So putting those kind of social areas within the museum so that those can happen. And then again, pulling in from the physical space, the areas for more private conversation or individual ponderation. So next, I'll be going over the empathetic immersion museum spatial categorizations that I've actually identified from my project. 1 being prepare, 2 being absorb, 3 being share, 4 being reflect, and 5 being remember. Prepare spaces are going to include the lobby and reception area, and these are where visitors are welcome to enter the museum and shape their expectations for their visit. Absorb is going to be that public exhibition space, just like the main place where all of the art is displayed and where people are discovering new information. And then there are share spaces, which are workshop and event spaces that you see in a lot of museums. This is where visitors can gather, talk about their museum experiences, make connections, and share their own perspectives on the art that they've seen. Then there is reflect, which is cafe and restroom facilities. This is where visitors can recharge and digest what they've absorbed. And then there's remember, where that's called the sales and gift shop, which is actually quite important because this is where visitors take a piece home of their experience and brings the museum into the world beyond. And then lastly, I'll be going over what exactly spatial distributions I've defined as key contributors for empathetic immersion within the museum environments. So I actually got these percentage of spaces, which will actually eventually translate into square footage allotments in my museum space, from how long or how much time people spend in each of these spaces. So they'll spend maybe 8% of their visit in the parking lot, in the walkway up to the building, in the main entry, in the lobbying area. They'll spend 41% of their time actually in the main exhibit spaces and main hallways in between. They'll then spend possibly 25% of their time reflecting in the restroom facilities, the gallery seating, and reflection rooms, which I've actually created a different kind of spatial typology for those, which is, I'll bring you back here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but these spaces that I've defined to reflect and digest within the gallery to a high level of privacy. And then the share space, people will possibly spend 18% of their time with that in the workshops, event spaces, cafes, public areas. And then remember, again, they might spend 8% of their visit at the sales and gift shop at the very end. So these spatial typologies are what I have based a lot of my programming on. Hopefully you guys will, be following on the rest of my project, but that's kind of the overview of empathetic immersion in a museum space. And thank you for joining.
Great. Thank you both, Kedzie and Josilyn, for just kind of opening up the inaugural Design and Discourse series. I would like to open up the floor, whether through people just sharing verbally through Zoom, or I'm keeping an eye on the text box if there's any questions or inquiries for our two presenters for today. Maybe Jackie has something. She just turned her camera on. So yeah, great to see you too, Jackie. Yeah.
Hey, Dustin, how are you?
Yeah.
Happy
Good.
Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. Yeah.
3 weeks down.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm counting down to spring break.
Are you going to Cancun?
No, I'm going to
spring break it?
Belize.
Oh, you are. Yeah, okay.
I am. Yeah. I'm super
Okay.
excited.
Yeah, I would be counting that down too. Yeah.
Yeah, the holidays were a
Yeah.
little stressful. I need a vacation. All right, I have just a couple small comments, and kudos to both of you. Those were really nice presentations, and quite interesting. And the direction that you're taking, I think, is pretty interesting. Just one question for Kedzie that I noticed when you were outlining your profiles. Under leisure seeker,
Yep.
you had an elderly couple that was going to a funeral.
Well, okay, those two graphs were not connected. Like they were, but it didn't correlate with the people that I had interviewed. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay, so I had created the leisure seek, like the whole 5 spindle graph,
Okay.
and then I had done a whole bunch of interviews with people from those various groups, and I'd picked
Okay.
just random ones to show.
Oh, I'm just curious why you
Yes.
picked an elderly couple going to a funeral, because
So, yeah.
honestly, I don't relate that to being leisure. It's usually pretty stressful.
Yep.
And that to me almost relates to the occasional traveler rather than the leisure seeker.
Yeah, so within my research, when I was identifying these 5 user groups, leisure seekers were usually older people that, had gone through the travel experience more than enough times to be comfortable, save time to go and like have lunch before they board their flight, or have a cocktail or something like that. And that kind of correlated to, that was like the profile of like the typical person. And then the graphs on the other side that went through each checkpoint were just people that I had that said, oh, I fall into this group, but let me tell you about my most recent journey.
Okay.
And so they were kind of separate. This one was like more typical.
Got
And this
ya.
one was
Okay.
specific. Yeah.
I kind of honed in on that. I thought it was a little
So I can see that. I can see the confusion.
yeah, and I've traveled a fair amount.
Yeah.
And I look at my own parents and all of that, and it is interesting with elderly people. So, and most of them are not that well traveled, actually, I find, at least that's been my personal experience. But other than that, really, really nicely thought out. And as I mentioned in the chat, I have been through that tunnel in Detroit Metro many times.
Do you like the tunnel? I've gotten mixed feelings.
No, I actually don't.
Okay, yeah, I feel
And
like people either love it or hate it. So
but just a couple quick comments, and I won't take any more time, but I get claustrophobic. So going through any of those tunnels is always very distressing. And I think Atlanta has one too that's rather long, and it's got the people mover thing, or the automatic walkway. But it's the blinking lights.
Yeah.
And some of them are a little more subtle than others, I find. So I think from a sensory perspective, it's something to keep in mind, because I would think some of that lighting could trigger
Yeah,
some anxiety in people. I don't know. It's not that comfortable for me, but I will tell you, it makes me go through it as fast as
quicker.
possible. Yes.
Yeah,
It
those
keeps-
lights,
and
just so
maybe
you know,
that's
for
part of the
your,
point.
yeah,
I
for
don't
your
know.
next experience though, if you do have to walk through it, they are controllable on either end of the tunnel. You can stop it if you want
Oh,
to.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, you can stop it if
There's
you
many
want to.
times. Yeah, see, I go through it so fast that I'm trying to get the heck.
Yeah,
And usually I'm in a hurry because my
Yeah.
flight, I have like this much time. So they are a necessary thing, though, I will say. And they don't always have to be a negative thing. But yes, I've spent a lot of time in that terminal for business travel alone, as well as with my husband and friends. So yeah, I've had lots of experiences in that terminal. Anyway, that and LaGuardia. Ugh.
Mhm.
So so if you ever want some feedback,
Yeah.
just
No, I appreciate it. I might
Just let
send
me
you an
know.
email. Yeah.
but other than that, great job. And I just have one tip, and this is not going to shock you, hopefully, having had me as an instructor, use spell check. You know how I am. My eye hones in. So just a little tip. You need to go back and do spell check. Josilyn, have you, I love the art museum thing. I think this is
Thank
such a
you.
great concept. Have you been, or anybody here, have you been to the Broad Art Museum on MSU's campus?
I haven't. It's on my bucket
You
list.
need to go before February 12th if you can swing it. And this is
Okay,
something
yeah,
I would tell
that's close.
everybody on this call. They have the Zaha Hadid exhibit there, who designed the building.
Yeah, I am familiar with that.
It's an amazing architectural experience alone. However, you need to go see, because it's a very challenging space when it comes to actual exhibits. And I got kind of a behind the scenes tour when I went, and the museum people kind of let some things slip about some of the challenges they have with the building. However, I'm not going to cloud. You just kind of have to go and experience and go
Okay.
into the toilet rooms.
Okay.
You need to see the toilet rooms, because
Is that like a good thing or like a bad thing? Like, what
I'm
am
not-
I?
you need to evaluate for yourself. We talk about
Okay.
universal design and all of these things. And
It's making me feel like it's a bad thing.
sometimes we sacrifice beauty for function.
Okay.
And this is no exception. However, it is an amazing space. So if you get a chance, take friends with you, because it is really a great experience. I went twice. I went with Kendall. They organized a trip. And then I went and took my husband and some friends of ours back, because I wanted my husband to see it. So, and it
Awesome.
explains the whole design of the building. There's a building model, there's all kinds of drawings and videos and whatnot, but it's also about her studio. She's an amazingly interesting woman. And the fact that it was designed by a woman, I think, is even more spectacular.
Yeah, that's
So,
always a plus.
and she does, she expressed her ideas through art. So I found that to be interesting.
Right.
So she wasn't necessarily a sketcher, so to speak, but she painted and did things like that. So I thought that was pretty amazing. She designed a lot of stuff that never came to fruition, which is also kind of interesting to me. So go there. If you can, you've got to try to experience that. Even
Great,
if
I'll
you can't do
definitely
it
check
before
that out.
February 12th, still go. It's definitely worth a visit.
Okay.
And one last question for you is, did you think about educational spaces at all?
So yes, that is educational spaces is what I've included in my like share bubble within like workshop. And that works, sorry, I just flew my pen. That like workshop space would be like an educational
Okay,
space.
then I must have just missed that then, because I think that's.
Well, I didn't mention flat out
Okay.
the word educational,
Got
but
it.
workshop is that what I'm thinking is that is happening within the workshop
Because I
space.
think that's an incredibly important element for public spaces like this.
Agreed.
Especially.
Agreed.
So, so I just wanted to mention that. That was it. Great job, guys.
Thank you.
So nice to see your work.
Yeah, we can have more discussions about how educational spaces relate to empathetic immersion, and there's other lines of thoughts related to Zaha as well. But you know, I wanted to. Are there any other general questions that anyone would have for the two presenters today? Double check
Yeah,
the,
I'll go.
Please, yeah, please, Rose.
This one is for Kedzie. Actually, great job for both those presentations. But Kedzie, I thought the sensory room in the Pittsburgh airport that you were talking about, explaining at first in the introduction, was a super cool idea. And I've actually been to the Pittsburgh airport like recently, like this past summer, and I didn't see it or like see any signs for it. But I was also like in a rush, as I always am. But I thought that was super cool, and I've never like seen that before in an airport. So like from your research, have you found that this type of space is getting implemented like a lot more recently, or if it's only like stuck to certain few airports?
Yeah, so more airports are trying to create more like touchdown zones for people to refresh throughout their travel journey between those checkpoints that I was noting. But I wanted to specifically show that precedent study because they had really taken like a similar concept that I was looking at and like putting their own twist on it and saying, okay, like these are spaces that need to be there that aren't. And it integrated some of my research. So I thought it was a great example. I'm not trying to do exactly what they're doing. Theirs was very focused, I'd say, on family travel and children with neurodiversities. That was like the main project scope had listed out, that they had noticed that a lot of even their staff had noted like when they're traveling with their children, there was not really a space where they could feel comfortable with their child while they were waiting, and they didn't have the privacy that they needed to just feel comfortable with their child, like not running off, but just making sure they were in a safe environment, preparing them to fly if they say their child was scared of the flying experience. That precedent study that I showed actually has a room that's kind of like a mock-up airplane, so you can sit like within like an airplane seat. I should have shown a picture of it, but it literally looks like the interior of an airplane, and it's really cool. And it's just, I really liked it because it really showed like, okay, like there are these worries. We're conscious that people have these travel anxieties, but how can we accommodate them? So I'd say it is becoming increasingly popular to help, you know, user satisfaction with how comfortable people are during their journey. I think that's something that airports, I found a lot of articles saying, especially after COVID, like how do we make people more comfortable in these large settings where there's lots of people, lots of things going on, just to give them a little bit more sense of ease. So yeah. Thanks for touching on that.
Yeah, and then just following that up, do you like plan on like differentiating spaces for like different age groups? I know you said that one was more family kid focused, and like, I mean, there could be different like requirements or stimuli for different ages and everything.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So with each one of the typologies that I had listed, my airport gate, my airport lounge, and then my private amenities, I'm looking at making like prototypicals of different ways that we could go at implementing a solution into it. So it's not just going to be like one final design of how we can define like an airport gate. It's going to be multiple iterations, just evaluating, okay, maybe it's even, and this is something I'm still trying to work out too with Dustin, we've had conversations, maybe even looking at, even though I have these 3 typologies, what if they're designed for each one of those 5 user groups that I'd identified? So it's going to be a lot of reiterating spaces over and over again to try to just look at the possible solutions that we could integrate into the spaces that already exist.
Cool, thanks.
Yes, well, we're like right out of time, so I will Kim asked me to provide some closing comments, which I'll do. So thank everyone for attending the first annual Design and Discourse series. We're hopeful this will be an annual event actually, and just speaking in terms of being faculty, one, there's like just tons of pride, I'd say, behind the work students are doing in our program this semester, the progression since year one to, oh my gosh, look at the complicated issues that are being undertaken, explored, examined now. And then two, just being the person teaching the second portion of the capstone, it felt really nice to just kind of scale back a little bit and take a breath and kind of recapture that kind of real clinching issues in both projects, right? Kind of get away from all the sort of specific details. But otherwise, we'll conclude unless anyone has any just like final comment you got to get in. Yeah, please go right ahead.
Yeah, I do. So
Oh,
I
yeah,
just
yeah,
want to
so-
say, Josilyn and Kedzie, I'm such big fans that you're going to think I'm a dork. I just ordered my very first Western t-shirt. But I am really, you are just amazing individuals. And I want you to know that I'm here for you in any way that I can be, any shape or form, something dumb, something big, whatever. Just know that you've got someone in your corner for anything. So know I'm here for you. Way to go.
We appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Tusky.
Great. Thanks for attending as well, Chesky. So fantastic. Well, I'm sure I'll see most of you around in the near future, and for others, the schedule has been posted. So hopefully you'll attend the next one. Have a great day. Have a great Friday. We'll see everyone later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.